Everybody, it's Eugene. Welcome to my webcast. I have a very interesting and knowledgeable guest on today by the name of Joshua Shea. He is an author, an expert, and an educator on the topic of pornography addiction. Hey Joshua, how are you?
Hi, Eugene. Thank you for giving me some time today.
Of course, I just want to let everyone know that we had actually connected weeks ago before everything really hit an intense place with the pandemic, especially in the NYC area, which is where my partner and I live. So we kind of had to step back a moment and reevaluate the different interviews that I was putting out. And Josh and I came to this place where we went, let's redo this, because what he brings to the table is still so valuable and important for all of us, I think, whether it kind of affects our own life or people that we love around us. And really quick, Josh, before we start conversing, I just wanted to bring up that you do have your first book that came out, and I know you have more than one that you've worked on, but the one that I'd like to focus on right now is The Addiction Nobody Will Talk About: How I Let My Pornography Addiction Hurt People and Destroy Relationships. This is on Amazon and other outlets for purchase. So I wanted to encourage people today through your story. I know when we talked before, there was something that you brought up to me that you had said about addiction and how it affected your life through pornography, through alcohol, and that there was an underlying issue that you were fueling into these as the addiction. Can we talk more about that and just kind of let our listeners and viewers know a little bit about your story through that?
Sure. I'm somewhat textbook when it comes to somebody who has dealt with pornography addiction. Patrick Carnes, who's one of the big gurus in this area, he did studies and found that roughly 80% of men who have a pornography addiction have suffered some kind of physical abuse in their past. Around 90% suffered some kind of sexual abuse, and as you know, astounding 97% suffered some kind of emotional abuse. I myself fall into both the emotional and sexual abuse categories. Like I said, it is a little bit textbook. I suffered this stuff around the ages of 4 or 5 years old at the hands of a babysitter that I went to during the day when my parents were at work before I started going to elementary school. Anyway, around the age of 12 years old, I was introduced to hardcore pornography by my cousin. He had a couple of hardcore magazines. I'd never seen anything like that before, but the moment I saw it, it was like a light shine down from above, and I just found something that literally within seconds of seeing it made me feel better, made me feel in a way that I'd never felt before. And it wasn't I don't think it was a sexual thrill of any kind. It was just this feeling of calmness or ability to cope. It's hard to even explain what it was as a 12-year-old kid, but this was just something different. When people say to me, I don't think pornography addiction's real, I relate this to the story of my alcoholism. When I was 14 or 15 years old, I got drunk for the first time. This was at a wedding where they had champagne at tables at the reception, and some of the tables nobody was at. So I went around when everybody was dancing and having fun and just started drinking. And after 6 or 7 of those, all of a sudden I realized, hey, this is why people drink this stuff. This feels fantastic. I get this now. This is like pornography. This feels great. So I think that in a strange way, or looking back, I think that pornography and alcohol actually helped me kind of suppress some memories from that babysitter's house. As I moved forward in life, I was pretty much an overachiever because I always sort of segmented my life. There was the family me, there was the professional me, and I lived my life in a bunch of little boxes, and as much as possible tried not to have them intermingle because I could play characters for people. And the one thing I could never do was really be myself by myself. If I was by myself, any time after the age of 13 or 14, I was pretty much either drinking or using pornography because I was just not good in my own company. Anyway, everything, I'll skip a whole lot of the story, but everything came to a head in my mid-30s. I went into treatment, first for alcohol in 2014, then for pornography in 2015. And what this really helped me recognize was that I was not using pornography for the naked lady or naked guy on the page. I was not looking for some kind of weird sex acts, and my life wasn't a orgy free-for-all. I have a wife, I've got kids. I was uh, I never cheated on her. Very normal, middle America type of marriage. But I used alcohol and I used pornography when, again, I was alone, and when I couldn't deal with myself, and when I also came to realize through recovery when I felt a sense of loss of power. And all of this really, like I said, it came to a head when my business was imploding. I was a publisher for a magazine here in Central Maine, and I was an overnight success back in 2009 when the magazine debuted. People were throwing buckets of money at me. I'm a bad business person, but you can hide that for a long time when you have buckets of money being thrown at you.
Right.
Unfortunately, you move up to 2013, and we saw our revenues flatten, but our expenses kept going up, and I wasn't making good choices. My relationship with my family was starting to fray at that point, and I was actually having some of these repressed memories pop back in my head, and what ultimately, through recovery and through working with people, that I learned was that, my coping skills in life were formed when I was that 4 or 5-year-old kid. My survival skills were formed when I was that 4 or 5-year-old kid. And I kind of developed the mantra, just say what you have to say and just do what you have to do to get to the next day. All you have to do is survive to the next day. That's the only goal. It doesn't matter how you get there. And that was essentially my coping skill, was, to always create an illusion of control in my life. That's why I started my own businesses. That's why I made sure I was an overachiever. That's why I always had these different segments of my life going on, so I could control each little piece and not have them intermingle and all fly apart. So it like we talked about the first time,
Yeah.
it really was all about control. I could, for lack of a better term, control the person on the page or control the person in the video. If I wanted to have, cheerleaders in front of me that day, I could have cheerleaders in front of me.
Exactly. You could go into whatever scenario you wanted.
Exactly. And they can't say no. In real life, people can say no to you. Yes,
Yeah.
people have other opinions. So really, the pornography was a big move into a fantasy land where I had total control. And in my life, if you look at the spikes of both my alcoholism and my pornography use, if you look at the valleys are when things were going well, when I felt like I had control, when life was good. Yeah. Exactly. And the peaks were when things were out of control. If I was in money trouble or other things were going on, that was my pacifier. That was my security blanket. I went to that, and it gave me that false sense of control. And I don't think it has anything to do with a cheerleader or, whatever, or a blonde girl or 3 people or whatever it is. It doesn't have to do with it. It has to do with me picking those people not being able to say no to me and me getting what I wanted. It had so little to do with actual sex. And I think that's where a lot of people confuse pornography addiction with just being a over the top recreational user.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for sharing all of this, because you brought up a lot of valid points and interesting points, even for me, that I can relate to. I've never had an issue with alcohol or with pornography. I could have a drink, I could watch something that is porn related and be like, oh, great, that was enjoyable for the time, moving on next. But what I did, and I went to my own Codependence Anonymous, because I had my own control issues or non-control issues in some way, allowing myself to be controlled by people to feel safe, to feel wanted, to feel needed, and then in return manipulating to feel that again. And mine was based, I think, again, from that age of 3, 4, 5. There were some issues that I experienced at home, healed and worked through them with the entire family for the most part, even as an adult now. But I do remember when I started going to that program that it was like filling the void, and it was covering up as like a symptom. It was a symptom of the bigger issue, of the bigger problem. And until someone said to me, because mine was a little different. Mine was more obvious. Yours, you could hide behind closed doors, right?
Right. Well, my alcoholism was the public addiction, and my pornography was the private addiction.
Yeah. Mine was pretty much, I could cover it up to a lot of people that didn't know me well, but the relationships that I had, especially romantically, and the people around me that knew it, were like, oh yeah, he's got some issues going on here. And it would start to bleed into my everyday life, and my life became unmanageable. Like you said, you had all this success, money's being thrown at you with the magazine, you're feeling good. You could still, if you felt out of control or insecure, you could close that door, put it on the computer or whatever you were looking at and go, okay, I'm back in control. Here's my fantasy world, right? And so it makes complete sense to me, and how so many people in life will cover it up, not deal with the underlying issue, create, like you said, these little boxes. Today I can be this, I can show myself as this, as long as you were in control. And I think that is something that all of us can look at in different ways, but there are many people that struggle with exactly of what you have faced. And what I'd like to talk about now is, it's interesting because you and I had some communication through email since things really got intense. And you had brought up some very valuable points of how it's even intensifying during this time. There's more access to it. More people are at home. There's boredom. Boredom is boredom. But then maybe some of the underlying issues really start to maybe creep up during this time. And I don't know. You tell me what you think. Can you share with us what's occurring during, like right now? You know?
Yeah, well, as much as I'm not a proponent of pornography, I do have to say that the website Pornhub does a fantastic job of putting out analytics in real time for people to follow. And I know they use it as a bit of a PR deal to show how great things are going. But what they did was, when the pandemic first hit Italy, France, and Spain, as a bit of a PR stunt, they allowed those 3 countries full access to their site, whatever the premium content members only stuff is. They let people get on that. Overnight, you saw places like in Spain, the overnight use of Pornhub popped about 40-50%. When the pandemic went worldwide, Pornhub then said, well, let's expand it worldwide. And so everybody in the world got free premium content, and they started tracking this and bragging about it. In America here, what was an average day of use on Pornhub popped up overnight about 20%. It dropped in mid to late April to about 10%, but here is we're now entering May as we record this. It's back up to about 15% more use every day, and you think, well, how big of a deal is that? But you figure, as of March 1st, Pornhub was the 10th most popular website in the world.
Wow.
It's the second most popular pornography site in the world. The other one is ranked at number 7. So, if you think about it, and then you think about, and this is how I extrapolate this figure, is that in a 2018 survey by an organization called the Barna Group, they found that 32% of men aged 18 to 30 self-reported that they either have a problem with pornography or feel like they have a pornography addiction. So 1 out of 3, whatever they technically have, 1 out of 3 men believe they have an issue with pornography, 18 to 30. So even if you, excuse me, even if you pop up statistics only 10% on average in a day, you're creating 3% more porn addicts in the world.
Yeah.
And, extrapolate that number over how many people there are, how many porn websites they are. And I think that, one of the lasting things from this pandemic is going to be, a bump in the pornography addiction statistics. Conversely, the other thing that because there is so much appetite for pornography now, a lot of these websites, especially the cam-to-cam websites where you go on and see a model and you can give her money to do different things or do it for a couple or a guy or, any scenario you can probably imagine. These websites generally work at a 50% commission. For every dollar I pay the website to see you do stuff, you get 50 cents, the website gets 50 cents. Several of these websites are now increasing their commission rates to try to attract new models. They're paying 75, 80% to bring in new people, because think about it, who got laid off the most? It was young adults who are, service workers, restaurants, bartenders, waiters, waitresses, generally the better looking people in society who maybe don't have their brains fully developed or understand long-term consequences. So they're doing this kind of stuff. And even for those who say, no, that's a little too far for me, there's been an explosion in a site called OnlyFans. And with OnlyFans, that's kind of like Facebook or Instagram, where you have your own stream and people subscribe to it. And on that stream, you can put adult photos, adult videos, and somebody has to subscribe, $10, $20, whatever you decide. You decide what the photos and videos are on the site, and you can control that to a degree. Of course, nothing stops me from recording my screen when I'm watching what you're doing and putting it back out on the internet for free. But this OnlyFans model is exploding, because I think what it's doing is it's lulling another level of person into a feeling of safety, because they're not actually camming in real time. They're not actually talking to anybody in real time. They're just, it's like if you and your girlfriend or you and your boyfriend, take some pictures or videos and you post them online. It's very kind of just away from you, and it's not an active thing for you, but you're making money on it. And I don't think that a lot of these people who have kind of been doing this porno light thing, which like I said, it's exploding, I don't think they're thinking about this either, because what I'm now starting to see online are stories of some of these girls specifically who thought they'd go on and make the thousands of dollars that they'd heard of people doing in the past, but you're now starting to see a bit of a saturation of that market. So there are girls who are getting 6, 7 subscribers, and it turns out putting your naked body online for $60 a month isn't actually worth it. But that's out there. That's out there. Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like I'd have to pay $60 for anybody to want to look at that mess.
It's interesting. I'm glad you brought all of this up, and it makes sense to me. I think the thing that this is what I wanted to bring up, though. Because more people are at home and this is being offered, I can understand that there might be a school of thought of, I'm bored, it's fun, it's interesting, I don't care if I'm proud of who I am, I want to share my sexuality and my body. And then there's that other side that I could hear people saying, since I grew up in the church, well, it's morally wrong. So, I mean, what I want to know from you is, what do you say to people that first play that I'm just having fun, it's no big deal, or on the other side, you shouldn't do it because it's wrong, it's a sin. I don't personally feel that anything is wrong unless it's hurting yourself or others, and or what we're talking about. And when I say wrong, I don't mean like bad. I'm just saying it's not healthy. We want to live in our full best as human beings. We want to be functionally and healthy and, proactive and all of those things. And I think, like you're talking about, it's a symptom, it's a distraction, and it can be even more serious. It fills a void that needs to be cleared and healed and recognized and treated. So I just threw a lot at you, but
Yeah, yeah,
because
no,
there's those
that's
little
okay.
things you hear people, it's not a big
Right,
deal,
right.
you know.
Well, a couple things. First, if you're deciding that you're going to go and participate in one of these sites, there was a great quote in an article about choosing to go and show your body online in any way from a former porn star. I think it was Asia Carrera. I don't remember exactly, but she said, you have to know that ultimately everybody will know you do this. Your friends will know you do this. Your family will know you do this. Your enemies will know you do this. You cannot hide this. No matter how clever you think you are, no matter what name you go under, this will eventually become known to everybody. So you have to accept that, and you have to accept it will be known to the people who you meet in your future. Will there be people who won't be friends with you? Will there be people who won't hire you? Are you planning on having kids? What do you say to your 14-year-old son who discovers your porn all of those years later? Now, those are things to think about. When it comes to the, moral wrongness of pornography, I try not to go down that route
Right.
because it's such a gray area, and there's science behind it, so there's no reason to. The fact is, if you look at people who utilize pornography, their views of sexuality do tend to get warped. For instance, and anecdotally, I was having a conversation with a woman who runs a health center at a college in Boston, and she was telling me she does small groups with different men and women, and in a group with women who are students at the school, they have all expressed that they don't like to be with virgin men. And it's because virgin men, their minds are warped from pornography. The first time they have sex, they are aggressive. They think they need to choke. They think they need to dominate. They have been raised on pornography and have this mindset that the man is there to dominate. So that shows you just anecdotally, one of the things that can happen with pornography.
And
Also, go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I just love what you're saying. So thank you I think you just hit it on the nail, because I have thought about that in the past. I have actually heard over time, my years on the planet as an adult, I've actually had friends that are girls say to me, yeah, what you're saying. I started dating this guy, and I don't know what his deal is, but he must be watching a lot of porn because he thinks this is the way it should be. And then in the other community that I'm associated with, the LGBTQ community, especially with gay men, they also have because they're not trained, or we're not trained, since I am openly gay, to think of sex as being healthy or monogamous or between two men that care for each other, because we were told for so many years, and still are continued to be told, and that's a whole different subject, is that by certain people that it's wrong. This is a sin again.
Right.
And therefore I've noticed that they in the community can also filter all of what they have experienced and say, this is how it should be. And then I've had other guys say to me, same thing. I cannot meet a guy out there that doesn't think that he's in a porno.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of porn, there was a great study not too long ago by some Canadian researchers that followed heterosexual married couples. And those married couples who were saying that they had some kind of marital problem or sexual problem, when they introduced pornography to their relationship, to the bedroom, they actually resulted in divorce 3 times more than the people who didn't introduce pornography to their relationship. Now, obviously, there can be a million other things involved, but that's 3 times. It's a big number. And then and the final thing I'll say, as close as I ever come to the morality aspect of this, you'll hear every once in a while out there that this producer makes ethical pornography, or this is porn for women by women, as if to put a positive spin on it. But here's the absolute fact: at its core, pornography is about objectifying another person. It's not about what they offer the world. It's not about who they are, what they're made of. It's about reducing them to a sack of body parts. And I know a lot of people can just scream past that idea and have no problem with it, but really at its core, that's what it is. It's complete objectification.
Makes sense.
and that's ultimately not okay in my book.
I don't think it's okay either. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that, but it depends again, if you're coming from a healthy place of who you are. When we're not talking about that. We're talking about individuals that don't feel good about themselves, whether it's self-love, respect, trauma that they went through, abuse, anything that we've brought up. And I think some people say, oh, whatever, porn, it's funny. But those are usually the people that don't watch it often,
Right.
don't think about it often, and they might like once in a while go, oh, this is fun, and then forget
Right.
about it.
Right.
We're
Well,
talking
I mean,
about,
yeah, I can go to a casino once or twice a year
yeah,
and win $50 or lose
there you
$50,
go.
and I don't care. I walk away, but I understand, because of my history with addiction, I understand how you could get really into that
Yeah.
roulette wheel or those slot machines.
Yeah.
Addiction is addiction is addiction is addiction, and people
Well, and
need
now
to
they have,
recognize that.
speaking of that, even though I know we're not talking about gambling, but I just saw on television, I was watching CNN. I try to keep up with a little bit of news every day with everything that's
Yeah, I think
occurring.
it's important.
And there was a commercial that I keep seeing about, now's the time at home to join and start gambling at home on this site or on this app. I mean, I know it was happening before this, but I've just started to notice these commercials, and I thought to myself, boy, there's going to be a lot of people addicted now. You don't have to be in Las Vegas at the casino
No.
or at one of the casinos in your local town. I mean, you can do it right online and on your app and be addicted and waste time and money and get into trouble.
If you can play to people's addictions, this is a wonderful time.
Yeah.
You've got people, it's like being on a desert island for a lot of us. I know we can go out and get our fast food and get our, groceries, but this is like being on an island for a lot of people. And, there is something to be said for that, idle hands are the devil's plaything. We can get into a lot of trouble when our schedules are wide open.
I agree with you. So, okay. So people watch this and they say, okay, makes sense, interesting. What do I do now? I think I might have a problem. They say to you, Josh, what do I do? What's the next step?
Well, the next step is you get some help, and even if that means just going online and looking at different bulletin boards and forums about your issue. You can go, a lot of times I'll talk to a couple of new or people just coming to the terms with having pornography addiction in a week. They'll contact me and just be like, I think I have an issue. And I'll do a, Skype call or a Zoom call with them for 15, 20 minutes. My best advice for somebody, you need to get help in the long term. You absolutely need to get help in the long term, because your addiction can go and go and go and really get to bad, sinister places. Most people, when they reach a critical level of addiction, it involves trouble with their job, trouble with their family, trouble with the law. That's where addiction ultimately leads most of the time. But if you can find somebody, and this is easier said if you're an alcoholic or you're a drug addict, but if you're, a porn or sex addict, if you can find one other one out there to talk to, you might feel like there's a weight off your shoulders. When I went to rehab for porn addiction in Texas back in 2015, I talked to some men who went to the same websites I did the same things I did. It's like, wow, I'm not the only person on earth who has done this. I'm not the only one who knows what I'm talking about. And they didn't judge me. That's the thing, is you talk to me about porn addiction, you can tell me what you've looked at, because I've probably seen just about everything.
Right. You're not judging or shaming.
Who cares? No. I come from, 35 years of active heterosexuality, and I can tell you I've watched all kinds of crazy sexual, situations. That doesn't define who I am.
Right.
It defines the fact that I have an addiction and I needed to escalate it, and I needed it to get more exotic, to get the dopamine hitting me. So, I get what happens. So my advice to somebody who thinks they have a problem, go online and try to find somebody to talk to about this. If you can find somebody like me who is in recovery, recovery actively, that'll probably help, because number one, it shows you that you can recover, but it also, like I said, it's a sounding board back and forth. I'm not going to judge you. It's a safe space. Talk to somebody who has dealt with this, and you'll probably feel a lot better about where you are. You're not a freak. You're not a bad person. You're not evil. You have a disease. It's a disease of the mind. It can be dealt with. You can recover from it, but you got to take that first step.
I love what you're saying. Thank you. One more question, and it's kind of the same kind of thing, but what about a parent that has a high schooler, or maybe even, I don't know, someone that maybe they're still at home and they're in college? Of course, I guess it's the difference between, are they a minor still? Are they considered an adult? But let's say there's a minor and a parent is figuring out that their child might, or teenager might be having an issue with this, but they don't want to embarrass them. They don't want to ridicule them. And there also could be that level of, I don't want to tell them that they're wrong, even if I do think it's wrong, right? It depends on your parenting skills. Do parents ever come to you and say, what do I do?
I get a lot of parents, and I get a lot of partners of porn addicts. That's actually my second book was directed towards the partners of porn addicts, but it fits just as well for parents. And the key is that you don't make any rash decisions or rash movements. What you need to do is first commit to yourself that there's not going to be judgment. It doesn't matter what Junior was looking at. It doesn't matter what your husband was looking at. What matters is that you create a safe, judgment-free space if you're going to talk about it. You're also going to have to expect denials at first, because whether your kid is 14 or whether your man-child is 44, you're going to have to understand that they're going to deny this, because porn addiction, looking at porn, masturbating to porn, is still very much a taboo that we don't talk about in society. Forget the fact that 80% of men under 30 look at porn every week, or 67% of men under 60. We don't talk about it. That's why the book's called The Addiction Nobody Will Talk About, because we don't. So you have to create a safe space and just introduce the idea of, I know that you like to use this material, and I just want you to be aware that much like drugs or alcohol or video games or gambling, that this can lead to an addiction, and I just want you to be safe. If the kid's 12, 13 years old, you can find literature, you can give them a website if you're too afraid to talk to them about it, or it's too embarrassing, or they won't listen to you. It can even be the same thing with an adult, although as a partner, you can create some boundaries that you really can't as a parent. And what I suggest is that parents, if you can actually start this before they get to that position, start talking to your kid when they're 7 or 8 years old in a very age-appropriate manner. You don't let people ever take pictures of what's under your bathing suit, but you also don't take pictures of what's under your bathing suit of other people, and try not to look at that stuff. And don't touch cigarettes, and look both ways before crossing the street. Just very matter-of-factly.
Matter-of-fact, self-respect.
And I think that the biggest key, I don't want to interrupt you, but I just think the biggest key is for like 14, 15-year-old boys who aren't quite addicts yet, to be taught that there's this thing called porn-induced erectile dysfunction. And that basically is a fascinating phenomenon where these guys can only finish sexually if there is pornography playing. Like, they literally could have the hottest girlfriend in the world, but they need pornography playing behind her to finish. I was dealing with a guy a couple months back. He's 22 years old. His girlfriend was also 22. They had an apartment. They got to the point where they would have to be in different rooms, essentially sexting each other over the computer for him to get aroused, because that was his, pornography. she became the star of his pornography. And when he was all worked up, it was like, yes, get in here. And then she'd run in the room and they'd finish that way. And that is so unhealthy. And I think that 13, 14, 15-year-old boys, I think that they, for the most part, are not addicts yet, and they want to have a girlfriend. They want to have a normal sex life.
Right.
They want to be normal. And if you tell a 13 or 14-year-old boy about porn-induced erectile dysfunction, you may stave off somebody going down that addiction road, because that's really in real time, in hard concrete real world figures. That's what can happen to you if you become an addict. And we scare the hell out of kids about drugs and alcohol. It's okay. I don't want to scare the hell out of them, but it's okay to scare them just a little bit, that there can be very negative consequences to pornography addiction.
I like what you brought up, not only because it's proven, right? But it's the fact that you're not saying, I'm just calling out a name, just a name. It's not like going, Johnny, that's morally wrong, don't do that. No, you're making it relate to, this is what can happen. It's not about right or wrong. It's about being healthy, a healthy adult, a healthy human being, having healthy relationships, functional relationships, and saying, like you said, this is what can happen if you become addicted to this. This can affect your relationships, your future girlfriend or boyfriend, wife or husband, whatever it may be. And I think if you can relate it back to that without the shame, without the judgment, but the facts, that it might help people go, oh, wow, I do want that. I want to be loved. I want to be happy. And I want to be able to give, because in my opinion, a sexual relationship is not just about what you can get from that. It's also what you can contribute and give, and vice versa. And like you said, it gets to the point where people are like, they're so programmed within their addiction, so up in their brain, that the only way the body will relate to it, right, is by watching it in whatever scenario it may be. I really want to thank you today for this time, because I feel like this was even more valuable and more powerful than the conversation that we had before, because it's relating right now to what's occurring. Yep. And this is a journey for all of us. Thank you for your courage to come out to the world and say, I was addicted to this. I got help. Now I want to help and educate you. It takes a lot of courage. You're a very brave human being and a brave man to talk about these things publicly. So I really appreciate that.
That does mean a lot. I thank you for that. And I also want to thank you for giving me the platform. There are a lot of podcasts that won't have me on. There are a lot that book me and then have second thoughts. Pornography is something that people are still afraid to talk about. And if we're not willing to talk about even pornography at its non-graphic basic level, how are we ever going to talk about pornography addiction? So thank you very much for providing a platform.
And stay safe and healthy. All right. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.